Good morning. Henry here with Tech Anarchy from the Tech Degenerates, here with Dawn Sizer. Dawn, how are you today?
Good. I am fantastic. And some of our guests are in Florida today. So, just in case anybody suddenly drops out, we want to make sure that you all know that obviously hurricanes hitting today if you're watching it in the future, I guess, at this point. But just in case, um, hurricanes happening, so we may have people drop out. So, just throwing that out there.
Yeah. And today we're going to be talking a lot about industry events and kind of the things that most people don't necessarily think about or know about industry events. Uh, but we have a wonderful group of people that will be joining us, kind of representing both the from the MSP side as well as event organizers and from the vendor perspective. So looking forward to that discussion.
100%.
Um, Go ahead.
I mean, just more along the lines of like, I think we all attend these events and think, well, why did they do things this way? Or why are we looking at things that I don't really care about? Or, what's going on with this? Or, geez, why does the food suck? Right? We've all had that conversation with other people, and we're going to find out a lot of the answers to those stimulating questions today.
Yep. Let's start off though with kind of recapping some of the industry headlines happening right now. So obviously there was the ConnectWise leadership change here that is going on, where Jason McGee is stepping down and Manny Ravello is be stepping up into that position.
Yeah.
Then there was some news. There was an outage about 2 weeks ago that we saw with Verizon, and it seems to coincide with latest release of some news around AT&T and Verizon and ADT all being hacked here recently by China.
Yeah.
Um,
So that's been interesting. I don't know if the rest of you have had issues with outages and such like that at client sites, but we've seen them go up and down repeatedly, and no one seems to know what's going on, which is interesting to be hearing from AT&T and Verizon, and then ADT did come out I think yesterday or the day before and say, hey, we're pretty sure we had a breach. A lot of information got leaked, so if you're using ADT, whether at home or with your business, you might want to start rethinking that.
yeah, and I know there's been a lot of speculation among some of our security friends about the AT&T Verizon breach because it seemed to coincide with a release of it's meant as an educational video about phone phreaking back in the day and how some of those things are still possible. And that outage seemed to align perfectly with that. And reportedly, the wiretap system that our government uses, both with AT&T and T and Verizon, were the items that were impacted as part of that latest hack. So, along with that, we're also seeing continued pressure and attacks against utility systems. I know there's been some news coming out about water department.
American Water, yeah, American Water got hit. It sounds like.
Yeah. So, if you have water departments as clients, I imagine that probably be reevaluating a lot of those security postures and practices.
100%.
And then lastly, here we have the CompTIA 2025 State of Cybersecurity Report was just released about a week ago. We will have a link to that in the comments and show notes. Now, Dawn, I know you've been on the road a lot here lately. I think you're back home for a little bit, but
Yeah.
you mind touching base on some of these events that recently happened?
Yeah. So TechCon Unplugged recently happened in Baltimore, Maryland, which is actually local to me. So I actually got to drive to something for a change, which was fantastic. Got to see Henry there, got to see Topper there, got to see a whole bunch of really, really good presentations. I actually got to see Topper present there, which was fantastic in a suit, which was, and I'll let him talk about that, but that was pretty cool. So that happened. Community Minds also went down. That was out in Denver, I believe, which Henry was a part of. So, what did you guys talk about at Community Minds?
Is kind of a refreshing, community-driven event where it was focused more on workshops and breakouts than the traditional sales pitches, and kind of a smaller, more intimate setting and group, but some really great discussions and practical knowledge to be shared there. So
Yeah.
you were at ASCII St. Louis, I believe.
I was. I believe this is one of the first times they've done this at St. Louis. It was a smaller group. It was an interesting grouping of MSPs as well. So from a maturity level, it was very interesting to see some of the lower maturity ones there. And there were some higher ones as well, but it was a very interesting mix there. And then I got to be at the inaugural event of Scalecon, which was absolutely amazing. And we're going to do a deeper dive into that later on. But it's probably my favorite event this year so far. So, and I don't know that anything is going to top it for me. So
That's high praise.
it is high praise. So I was pleasantly surprised and very excited for it.
Very cool. Well, speaking of praise, one of the things we're going to start doing as part of this live stream is having an industry featurette on someone that everyone should know in the space. So we're going to open up nominations for people. And basically, we want to do a quick 5-minute featurette that we'll produce on someone in the industry for each month that you think needs to be cheerleaded and celebrated. Someone that contributes and adds back to the community and to their peers, and has really added a lot of value to everyone around them. So, if you want to hop on the Tech Degenerates website, we will have that nomination form up there for people to be able to use.
We should probably do a special shout out to Paco LeBron for both doing TechCon Unplugged, but also on his recent marriage. So that was very exciting to see. So congratulations, and we will see you again as TechCon comes back around.
Absolutely. All right. So starting to dig in, I know you and I, because we're at a lot of events, we get hit up by by all sides on where vendors should spend money, what events they need to be at, what MSP events, or I'm sorry, what events MSP should be at, and kind of conversations around those things as far as how do they maximize their value from every perspective. And it seems like there's some misunderstanding, miscommunication about the different types of events, some misconceptions around what it actually costs to put on an event, and the different involvements from everyone involved. So I think today we're kind of hoping to get some different perspectives and try and talk a little bit deeper about those things that happen behind the scenes and things people may not think about that are happening with these industry events.
Well, and the exciting part is that we have a really diverse group of event organizers and people that have done events and or have either produced, engaged at, or have their own events. So they're able to really give us some backstory on, why they're doing what they're doing, what their engagement looks like. We don't want to get into the true nitty gritty of spend because I don't think that's fair, but there is an aspect of that, how much it costs them to go to an event and what their ROI really is, but also the different types of events that are out there, because some are security focused, some are marketing focused, some are community focused, and some are around a product, right? So we want to talk about all of those different things because there is a form and function to all of them, but there's also a reason for an MSP or a solution provider to go to each one and maybe send different people to.
Absolutely. So with that, let's introduce our panelists today. Start off with Andrew Morgan with Right of Boom. Andrew, how are you today?
Am I live? Am I with you?
You are.
All right. So first, Dawn and Henry, thanks so much for having me on. Right now, it's not sunny here in Tampa, but we're waiting to see how the fate of Milton comes our way. But thank you so much for having me, and I'm still got some power and some internet, so
Well, fingers crossed, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully that'll keep stay that way.
And for those that don't know you, Andrew, and the event Right of Boom, you mind giving a quick kind of summary or recap of what the event is and what you guys kind of aim to do with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So this will be in 2025, Henry. This will be our fourth year, and you've been to every one, and I really appreciate you always being one of the early ones to support it. And Dawn, I think you've been there as well.
I have. I did not go this year, which is why it was not on my favorite list. So
Okay, we're gonna have to change that.
we
Um,
did.
so, Henry, just a little background how we got here, right? In 2020, coming out of the pandemic, we started the cyber call, and it was really about trying to do education to MSPs around cyber maturity and profitability in thereof around that area. Um, and the cyber call has now had north of 8,000 MSPs over the course of that time. MSSPs, it's free. It's a community thing we do every Monday. We're in our 5th season, and one thing I noticed was there was no industry event that was really vendor agnostic. I mean, there are some. So let me clarify. Like, don't give me but there's this one or this one. But for the most part, right, they're driven by the big players and people that are looking to sell something. And I wanted to fill a void where everything was about educating MSPs, both sides of the house. We do technical training for the technical resources that are looking to get better in their skill sets around security. And then on the business side, we focus on everything on go to market, sales, and different strategies for revenue facing side. So if I could just share lastly, for years, the first 3 years, we've done a journey. Everybody's been in one room and we oscillate between tech and business. And this year we're switching it up where we have 2 tracks. The tech track has led by John Strand and 6 other former and current SANS instructors. So there'll be 2.5 days of hands-on keyboard, 6 different workshops that you can go find out more about at that URL. And then for the sales-minded and business-minded folks, we are kicking off with the author Brent Adamson of the Challenger Sale and his latest research. We've got a phenomenal fireside chat the night the kickoff with 2 amazing MSPs, which are Logically CRO Steve Rivera, who will be on stage with Brent, and Bill McLaughlin of Thrive, and really talking about what it's like to use Challenger and methodology and how to transform that. And all the other sessions on the business side are things around building a vCISO practice with Ntivas. Jerry Craig, who's legitimate CISO and built their practice, to how to sell, use automation as a sales wedge with Aaron Chernin of Roost and Gary Pica. So everything's about how do you maximize profitability, go to market if you're on the revenue facing side. But there's no sales pitches, and we have nothing to sell. So if you're speaking main stage, you're educating.
Right. One of the best things about Write a Boom is the way that you guys frame everything around the framework, which I thought was really a great way to do it, because then you kind of know where you are in the journey, where you are in the framework, exactly what you're talking about and what you're trying to solve. So I think that's a unique way of doing it, and it was very refreshing to go to a conference and see that.
Thanks, Dawn. Yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
For sure, no, and that's something that's kept me coming back. Is absolutely just kind of a refreshing take on the approach in the industry here. So I know the very first year with Sunil Yu was just kind of like light bulb moment for me of like, oh, this is absolutely stuff that needs to be on every MSP's radar. So yeah, fantastic stuff and fantastic content, and I really appreciate you taking the time. I know weather down in Florida is by far challenging, to say the least, this last couple weeks here. So appreciate you taking the time with us today.
Thanks for having me on, Henry.
Yeah. Also in Florida, going to bring on Michelle, talk a little bit about SonicWall Elevate and her history and experience with events.
Sure. Well, hi, everyone. Thanks for having me as well.
Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It was a great conversation and one I think that we're very passionate about. Henry, I have the pleasure of sitting with you on that CompTIA board for the channel advisory community, and it's been a hot topic. I think I had originally from my husband, Jay McBain at Canales, 270 events a year. I think you mentioned that you've counted up to 500 events a year. So for somebody like me as Global VP of Channels for SonicWall, that's a lot of events and it could be cost prohibitive and time consuming, and we have to figure out where do we want to invest our sponsorship dollars to get the right return on that investment. And then also for us, when we build our own event as Elevate, as you mentioned, Elevate was one of the first events Sonic Wall has had in almost 8 years. So that was really exciting to be a part of for me. We are obviously known in the industry, I think, because we've been around for 33 years, but we've reimagined the company and we've done a lot of investment. We've made 2 acquisitions within the last 10 months. Our friends at Solutions Granted, for those of you who know them, Michael Crane, my brother from another mother, and his amazing company is now part of our managed security services. And then we also acquired a company called Banyan for cloud secure edge. So outside of the firewall, outside of what people most typically know us for, we've really done an amazing job with our product team and our engineering team and our leadership team to just reimagine Sonic Wall. And that was the intention of Elevate, right? So bringing together a few sponsors and some of our partners, a lot of longtime partners, which was amazing to see. You know, when you look out in an audience and you say, oh, how long have you been a SonicWall partner? And you see people saying 10, 20, 30 years. I've been in the channel for 20 years, and some of these people have been partners of this company longer than I've worked in technology. So I'm very inspired to be a part of that and to be a part of kind of an evolution. But I lead through education. I don't like product pitches, so I love what Andrew's doing. I love what a lot of vendors do, but some vendors miss the mark. And so my hope is that we do provide value and education beyond what Dawn mentioned. You know, there is, you know, the peer groups and associations, there are vendor communities, there are distribution communities. And in my role, there's also like the vertical communities because we sell into every vertical. So healthcare and retail and state local education and federal. And so there's a lot of options of where to represent. I actually spent the last 2 days at the Retail Association event for technology, which happened in West Palm Beach, Florida. I was walking through the halls and a bunch of people were checking in with their dogs and cats trying to escape the hurricane from the West Coast. And I think that, you know, we're in this place where I like to say we're better together. And so that's the goal. How do we help elevate one another? Because it helps if we can support and think about what's in it for our partners.
Awesome. Yeah, no, and I'm really interested to kind of dig in on a little later here about what how you choose what events to be involved in as part of Sonic Wall, as well as I have to imagine there are some unique challenges, kind of reimagining and reinvigorating the Elevate event when you guys brought it back. So, looking forward to kind of digging into that. Awesome. And thank you as well so much for hopping on today. I know our Florida contingent is well represented today amongst our panelists. So thank you very much for braving the weather and making time for us.
Thank you, and sending prayers to everyone. We hope that everyone stays safe out there. And if you have to evacuate, you're welcome to come. We can set up a camp in my house if it's okay. If not, we'll just shut her up together. So hopefully we're all okay.
Sounds good. All right. I'm going to go ahead and bring in George here to talk a little bit about Community Minds, an event that's been going on now. I think we've had 3 of them now.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. So we just finished our third one of Community Minds. We started in Denver last year, went to Nashville earlier in the year, and then came back to Denver just a couple weeks ago and wrapped up here for 2024. So this was the kind of next stage of, we were on during the pandemic, you probably remember me and Ken Patterson and a bunch of other people just in a band tour bus, rolling around America, doing outdoor parking lot kind of style events. And then, once everybody came back to reality and, all the rules and restrictions and, came back to, normal time, we decided to go into more of a community educational style event. And, quite frankly, a little bit of a learning session. I'm going to speak for everyone that you have on this session. Um, Events are harder than they look like to do, like to coordinate, to plan, to produce, and they're also expensive. They just are, right? Like, I don't know if anybody's planned a wedding. That's probably the one thing that, if you do get into that chair, you start to get like a little bit of a Cliff Notes version of what we're talking about here. There's just a lot of fine details and things that you would think aren't very expensive turn out to be expensive, right? I don't know if you ever looked at it, but like a Diet Coke is like $8 in a lot of places, right? Especially if you open it and you don't drink it, we're like, finish that drink. But yeah, so from a long, big picture view, and as a guy that's been around, maybe not as long as Michelle, but I've actually gone back and added it all up. I've been to over 1,300 plus industry events in my journey here. I've seen them big, I've seen them small, I've seen all the different formats. And to Andrew's point from earlier, right? Like the big ones are the big ones that are in the calendar every year, and we all seem to work around those. But 500 events, my goodness, that's a lot. And I know it's almost to the point where if you don't want to be working and you just want to be on the road all the time, you can surely do that.
Yeah, for sure. No, and I think it's interesting to see and encouraging to see so many community-driven events starting to pop up too, because obviously there's a demand for less sales pitches and more educational content and individuals that are looking to fulfill that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that, and listen, you guys are part of the voice here, and there's many others, right? We're just kind of doing our part to try and shift and thanks to people like Bob Coppage who made it clear that the big events that we're all talking about all come from an earlier world, like Comdex, right? Where like we're all running off of a really old blueprint that keeps on getting Xeroxed over and over and over again. Just the logo gets crossed out on the top and they change it with something else. I think that the quality of content being presented, and I think let's take the polish off a little bit and let's get into more of a truth, session about what people are actually seeing and what people are actually running into rather than the hypothetical and the maybe you should consider rather than this is what I'm actually dealing with right now. I think that's where we tried to take a turn with putting together an educational event. So the more people are encouraged to be interactive, right? Like we're not just presenting at people, we're talking with people. And if we can get people to actually have a dialogue, like I'm having a conversation with you over a beer at the bar kind of thing, but around topics with people that have figured something out, I think you get to a better outcome. And so that's really what I thought was good. Like I think, and again, maybe speaking for everybody here, feel free to contradict. I think everybody will say that the best thing about any industry event, all 500 of them, is probably the hallway and the bar time, kind of, open dialogue and banter and chatter. But if we can take that and actually flip it into the actual format of an event, I think you get a little bit more, open and honest communication where people are a little bit more engaged. And then the other thing to that end, Henry, is like, we want people to learn. How many times have anybody gone to a breakout session at any conference, walked away with notes that never saw the light of day because you lost them by the time you got home, or 6 months later you're like, oh, that's right, I was at that and I never did anything about it. So, I think bringing experts in who are actually not looking for but if you want to learn how to actually do this, please subscribe with your credit card number at the end. I think that's more beneficial than what we've seen a lot of over the years. So, we want people to walk away with actual steps, right? Rather than just a PowerPoint slide deck. So I think that's what we were after with Community Minds. And I think moving forward, these style events can be successful. And actually, I'll go one step further. Uh, Combining multiple communities together to generate these style of events, I think, is the path forward, because now you bring that diversity across multiple backgrounds together into a room. So I think that's the path.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's definitely seen some interesting things happen as far as partnerships and joint ventures between some of the events. I think that next year we'll see more and more of that, to your point. So, and kind of on the topic of deliverables, one of the things that I heard a lot of positive things about this year was the deliverable around Scalecon. Dawn, I know you were there.
I was. It was really good. There was a workbook. Let's put it like that. And I'm going to let Taher tell the rest of the story because it's his story to tell.
Taher, welcome.
Well, thank you so much. Appreciate y'all having me, Don. Really appreciate you being there and the positive feedback. It's funny, like LinkedIn posts is the new PR. It's like, newspaper articles afterwards. And to see all of that PR happening from amazing people like you and everybody else is great, as well as some negative PR, which, is great too. Very minimal, but that kind of stuff is great too, because we can learn from it.
Well, you know what to fix for next year that way.
What's that?
You know what to fix for next time.
Yeah, totally. So, yeah, Scalecon, it was as good as I could have ever imagined. We had about 4.5 months to pull it off. I just had an idea. Nigel invited me to a conference in May. I got back from that conference, and like a couple weeks later, I messaged him on WhatsApp. I was like, dude, I'm doing it. You down? And, if you know Nigel, he's a planner. So I was super surprised when he said yes. So we kicked into gear and kind of just had a marketing, sales, and account management specific event. Everybody says there's too many events, but when I look at that niche, there's not enough. And, we have a marketing podcast. When I look at that niche, there's not enough podcasts. So I think people say there's too many X, but really as you kind of niche down to a specific persona, there's not enough. I think we all want to go general because it's a bigger TAM, but really we need to talk to our specific people in the room. So anyway, I loved it. It was so much fun. We learned a ton that we're going to change next year for sure. I agree with George. These things are way more time and way more money than I would have ever expected going in. I feel like if I would have known what it would have been, I never would have done it. But I'm glad I did, because now I'll never stop doing it. And I'm happy to share. Me and Nigel are both open books. I actually have our revenue and expenses spreadsheet. I'd be happy to share if y'all want to see it later or whatever, or on this call. More than happy to share exactly what the economics of these events are.
Like, I was shocked when you actually told the audience it was $160,000 for food. And I was like,
Just the food, yeah.
Oh, that's a lot.
And I knew I could say that because me and Nigel, again, we're co-hosts, but we're both just open books. If you ever talk to Nigel, if you ever talk to me, like we don't have anything. So yeah, maybe I'd get in trouble with the venue, but not with either host, me or him. So yeah, and I think the last thing I'll say on this, just because I don't want to take up too much time on the call, is I love how the end of it, everybody kind of knew what it was about. Somebody was like, we did live feedback and someone said, hey, I wish we could have a little more tech talk. And the audience politely all said no to him. And I was like, wow, that was kind of cool. Like, everybody understands what we're building this for. So I thought that was pretty cool too. Well, obviously they weren't mean or said anything nasty, but they were just like, hey, let's kind of keep it the way it is. So some feedback we're going to definitely change for next year. Other feedback, we're just going to have to say it's not for this event. So anyway, that's enough for me. If y'all want to see the spreadsheet, happy to share it on this call. And yeah, thanks. Looking forward to next year.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining us, and also another Floridian in the path there. So appreciate you taking the time.
Happy to.
With that, let's go ahead and bring everyone in here. I think what I would like to start off with is kind of talking about where you see the industry events today versus where they were, say, pre-COVID. Like, what do you think has changed? What still needs to change, or what needs to go back?
They need more Dr. Pepper. By the way, George, whenever I open up a Dr. Pepper,
that's $9 per, not $8. Just letting you know.
Okay, well, that's probably why. But I do drink the whole thing. I just want to point it out. If I'm opening a soda, it's mine. You're not taking it from me.
I would listen. I think, and again, open for absolute debate here. There are some events going into 2019 that I thought were going to die in 2019, going into 2020, and then I think COVID threw a wrench into the whole story. Okay, and then people came out of COVID, and had time to change post COVID. So I don't know if pre-COVID, post-COVID, but I hate to use that word, but it happened. I think pre-COVID, um, we were on a trajectory where it like a new event was popping up every single day, and then I think COVID obviously put the brakes on that. It kind of slowed down, and I think we're back to that similar trajectory now. To Tahir's point, targeted events I think have been lacking, like more systematic, maybe smaller, intimate events. I think have been lacking, and everybody goes for the home run. Shoot, like what was it that one IT Nation, shoot bullets before you bring out the cannon? Like, I think Andrew at Right of Boom has done a great job of starting reasonable, small, manageable, and growing in a way that is like scalable over time, rather than I'm going for the ballpark on event one. I think Tahir probably learned a little bit about that too on his first event, Vegas and all. So at the end of the day, I'm going to restate what I said earlier. Like, events are hard. They are hard. They are cumbersome. And if you haven't done it before, it is literally an industry unto itself. And people literally do this every single day, and we all don't. So I think the quality of the events, to your question, Henry, need to need to change. It can't just be the same recipe for decades and years and over again with the Xerox machine. We need to start solving a question, a thing. And if we can do that, I think the people, it's almost like we talk about the MSP industry. If you're a generalist, it's hard to scale your business. If you target verticals, you can become a specialist in that area. I think the same applies to events. And the more general the event, the harder it's going to be to continue to operate, in my opinion.
For sure.
I was going to say, Henry, if I could chime in, George, I think really well said. You had a great perspective. I didn't realize you did. Was it 1,300 events? That's phenomenal. But I mean, I think if we take a step back and look at the macro landscape, I think one of the things that's so different between, I think you said part of the question, Henry, right? It was post-COVID, pre-COVID.
Yes.
I think one of the big things is we got to look at PE, and I think we got to look at the just the proliferation of vendors that are realizing that the MSPs are the gateway to north of 60% of the economy. So you have not only I think George, like pre-COVID, let's just throw a hand out there. You had the exchanges, the ConnectWise, the Datos, blah 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 blah. A handful. Well, I mean, when I look at people that have contacted us, and we're grateful for the interest, but I think just in the security space alone, like this isn't like somebody contacting an IT Nation, which is very, cross sectional, right? But we're around 400 prospects, just in the security type tool sets, which are heavily, on the margin, heavy PE backed. And so there's a lot more money in this space more than ever. There's a lot more consolidation more than ever in terms of MSPs and their growth. And probably the other thing is, I think some of the vendors are jaded, and rightly so, from some of the big events where they've been told they're irrelevant main stage. And so they're sitting there saying, well, if I, instead of spending $100,000 on this show, what if we had our own shows? What if we took that money and did it for ourselves? So that, just anecdotally, I just wanted to throw, George, I don't know if you see that kind of same, perspective of
I'm following you, and I generally agree with where we're going here. I mean, at the end of the day, we can talk about this from the persona of the attendee and the conference goer and the vendor and the expectations from the co-sponsoring, kind of entity. The reality is that there's math involved in every part of this conversation. From a vendor standpoint, Andrew, brass tacks, money usually doesn't meet the road, right? Meaning, like, if I am paying for a table and 2 chairs, and what used to be a 6x6 or a 10x10 is now turned into a 3x3, how many, like, let's just work backwards from I need this many contact points at this event to get to this many conversations to get to this many customers. I don't see how that math works today in 2024. Quite frankly, I don't think it worked in 2019. So to that end, the PE VC like gun behind people's heads in the organizations where there is surely a fire underneath of those people to produce results. Events are the probably one of the more expensive, if not most expensive ways to get to that outcome. That being said, and I'm going to use Vegas here to hear, don't beat me up, Andrew, don't beat me up. The house always wins most of the time on the events. The person who's co-sponsoring usually loses, and it's a casino in many regards. So from that aspect, I think the making it work for everyone has been broken for quite some time.
Yeah.
I'd love to jump in because I think, George and Andrew, you hit some really good points. I'd say in a pre-pandemic world, there was an exhaustion, I think, to some extent of the types of events or what they're receiving. I think COVID caused people to have such a desire to be around people again. And I loved your bus tour that went around the country. That was a lot of fun for people to, socially distance, but get together and not feel like they're locked in their house with the same people 24/7, 365. It was a really big opportunity to change that. And I think, to your point, when we came out of that, there was such a supply demand shift that there was, vendors were able to charge more for sponsorships. And we sit on both ends of that, right? Where we have just now hosted our first event, I would say, in quite some time, but we do sponsor a lot of events. And I spent 14 years at Cisco prior to coming to SonicWall. And I probably have been on the road just the last 10 weeks, every week. And so when you think about that, the investment out of everything you could do, webinars, blogs, podcasts, emails, all of the things, by far and away, an event is going to get you the best return on your investment. You're going to meet the most people. You're going to have the most conversations. And there's multiple types of events where you can have 4,000 people in a room, but are you having the quality conversations that you need? Or you can have a smaller, more intimate setting where you actually do build those relationships. And in our industry, in every industry, people buy from people they like, know, and trust. And it's not 30 minutes on a stage, but that's a start to drive traffic to the booth. And then there's the conversations at the booth or the people that want socks and notebooks. And you have to kind of delineate, like, what is the value that I'm providing? And can I tell you, for example, we had 2 days of our event and we still didn't get through all the changes we made. Can I tell our whole story in half an hour in a breakout session or on a main stage? Probably not. I'm going to give you the very 10,000 foot in the air, high level, like, things are different. We want to help you. Here's the changes. But to spend more time, that's where these local road shows, I think, are a great point as well. Because think about it from the partner's perspective also. Many of them only go to 2 or 3 shows a year. And so we as vendors want to be omnipresent because you never know where that next customer is going to come from. And that's the issue, right? How do you select? And amazing events, and I'll use Scalecon as an example. I would have loved to have sponsored and attended that, but sometimes we plan a year in advance, just trying to navigate where we can invest our dollars. And so then you take notes. Okay, I hear great things. Other vendors are saying great things. Other partners are saying great things. This is a non-negotiable for next year. We have to be at Right of Boom. We have to be at Scalecon. But that's how you have to sort of determine it through your own peer group as vendors or partners as well. What was the feedback and what are the sentiment around that?
I'll be bugging you in a couple months here, Michelle.
Call me.
So to dig in a little bit on the numbers and metrics, so just for the audience sake, as far as a range of sponsorships on events, it goes from let's sponsor the lanyards or a lunch from a couple $1,000s up to, we've worked with some vendors that are spending $1 million at a show. And that's one vendor at one show. And so the money is kind of all over the map there, as far, and obviously it's a huge investment. I would say probably most shows, you're probably looking 20 to 100,000 per vendor to.
Let's flip it around, Henry. Let's flip it around. If Andrew, Taher, I know what my number was for Community Minds. My number was $478 per person for a 2-day event, all in. Right? That's room, AV, food, those $8 Diet Cokes and Coke Zeros that you're drinking, all of it. Right? So, do you know what your cost per attendee for your events were, guys? Because I would have a hard time thinking you're getting underneath of that number.
Mine was 610 for a regular and 1,001 for a VIP.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody that registers, we're losing money.
Yeah.
Yes. No, and to that point, though, is everyone's got to draw a metric for that return on investment behind it. How are you guys setting those metrics, and do you think that those metrics are still viable or current with the market that we live in now?
I number one, to everyone who puts on an event, Michelle, Taher, Andrew, all the other 495 other people out there, there is a risk here, okay? Like, you could be negative and underneath your costs on the event. You could be underwater on it, right? And I think that happens more often than we think. That being said, the metrics come down to, and maybe we could talk about this for 2 minutes. Like, are we asking someone as an attendee to register for this event? Are we making it free to them? If so, how does that get covered on the back end? Like, that these kind of pieces on the formatting of this change how the math works.
Yeah. Like, I've seen people, MSP, say they want a free event. We need to just get rid of free events, because the minute there's a free event, you're the product. Like, I mean, if you don't figure that out, then it's your fault for going to an event and being sold to. Like, obviously these things are expensive, and like, we have to have a nice middle ground between not ripping off the vendors and also charging the MSPs. Like, for instance, our event, we're going to lose about $70,000 between everything, right? And I'm okay with that. Me and Nigel went into it okay with that. We knew we were going to lose money. I also realized another thing. We significantly undercharged sponsors. And I'm okay with that again, because we had 2 months to get vendors, right? But I knew when both platinum sponsors sold out the first week, we're doing something wrong. And when all of the sponsorships sold out, we're doing something wrong, right? I was like, okay, we're doing something wrong. Like, I'm in sales. Like, if things are too easy and I don't have to work for it, there's some wiggle room here. Now, if I would have, priced the sponsorship correctly, we probably would have made up for that $70,000. And then we would have just had an amazing event where everybody won. Because a lot of the vendors said this was the best show that they've been to. Some, we can't make everyone happy. But one guy said, Stretty said they wanted 3 new customers and they would pay for the event. They got 8, right? So, there's things like that. Like, Mondra wanted 15 demos. They got 40. So there's like that direct metrics from vendors saying this was great. The attendees saying it's great feedback to change next year, obviously. But those are the things we really pay attention to. We can't just keep the vendors happy. We can't just keep the attendees happy. It really is this juggling going on that I've learned to just embrace.
Mm-hmm.
So staying on that same topic for the MSP side of things, right? When we're looking at an event to come to, I mean, I'm looking at what the event is, I'm looking at where it's at, what it's going to cost me. I'm looking at who's sponsoring it, right? Because if it's people I've seen and heard and dealt with and don't want to deal with on the repeat, I'm not going to go, right? And if it's something that trips my trigger, or there's a couple of vendors that I need to talk to, then I'm probably going to go. So how do we work together to iron this process out, right? Because there has to be a return on investment for the people that are putting on the event, but also the people that are showing up, but also for that MSP, right? Because it's very rare that I ever get contacted ahead of time by somebody I care to talk to while I'm at the event. And I think I get talked to by people I don't want to talk to, but not the ones that I actually do. So how do we flip that script, right? and make it so that there's a way better return on investment for everyone involved.
Michelle, I think you're
You're
muted
Oh
there.
yeah, sorry. Thank you. I win the prize today. I'd love to tackle that one because that is a really great call out. And a lot of times, if a vendor's hosting an event, they do not give you the full contacts list, or they don't give you the leads list before the event happens. And so what happens is, if I wanted to be strategic and say, I'd love to set up a dinner or lunch or what have you with partners, and reciprocally so invite people if they'd like to meet with me, I don't always have that option. And so that's where I think it comes down to, there's this like protectionist, again, the house wins to George's point, and the people that would like to connect with one another have to stumble upon each other either at a breakout, a booth, or a hallway conversation, or at the cocktail lobby bar. And so I think that's where we have this the gatekeeping, because if anyone could just talk to anyone, then perhaps they wouldn't pay for their event. And so there is skepticism probably on their end. But I do think that that's an important factor. And the other thing you said, which I did want to talk to, because I do a lot of different styles of events. And the event I was just at was actually an interesting one, because the person who put this on for the Retail Solutions Association, he originally was one of the people that put these on, that sold it to Gartner, that now the channel company owns. And so those CRN, Exchange, NextGen, all of those best of breed events, what's fascinating about those is that you have kind of boardrooms, which are 20 minutes, their airfare is paid for, their hotels paid for. So you are guaranteed as a sponsor that you're going to get people in a room, you're going to get feedback, and you're going to get a call to action. That's really valuable for a vendor, because if I speak out a breakout session, I could have 400 people in standing room only, or four because they went to the beach and they don't want to show up. And so my ROI is, or somebody else had a better speaker or topic or title and it was more appealing. And so it is really challenging to get butts in seat. And that's really what we want. I mean, for me, I think if we speak and you hear us speak, then we're going to increase traffic 100%. But it's very challenging because those are the more expensive parts of the sponsorship. And if we can't secure those, and that's why these quote free events are free, because sponsors like us pay for them for guaranteed conversations that drive usually better return. So that's where I'd
So two parts, and I'll try and keep it brief. But I think the community aspect needs to be leveraged more. We want to know, if you're not going to show up, I could put the best event on the planet. It doesn't matter, right? I need to understand what you're looking for, so that when I craft the content in my event, I can be tactical rather than generalist. I know I'm just repeating the theme, but it's very important. And then number two, Michelle, I mean, depending on who we're talking about, and there's 500 to talk about, but like, this is back to the casino. They are literally taxing the air that you breathe, and this is why they don't share a lot of that stuff ahead of time, which unfortunately has become a little bit of a game. Let's take the game out of it and let's find the win-win. That's what I'm asking for. That's what I've been asking for a decade. Unfortunately, I think a lot of us in this session here have opted to create a new game rather than play the old one. And so, unfortunately, if we can't affect change, then we're going to create change in a different way. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that.
So, to me, it kind of sounds like we need to set better expectations as between attendees and vendors. Some sort of like best practices. Hey, before you go to an event, look at the sponsors, look at the vendors who are going to be there. If you know them, reach out to them, arrange a dinner. Everyone wins then. You get the extra engagement that the vendor sponsor is looking for, and the attendee gets, to eat dinner type of thing, as one example. So that organic engagement should be driven more, and I think that that's more of a best practices thing that the attendee needs to drive themselves a little bit. They need to know to do that, and if they don't know to do that, they're not going to do it.
Mark and Craig, I'd be interested in your perspective on, obviously there's a lot of noise out there, both event fatigue as well as just marketing noise that as MSPs you guys are at least subjected to. What do you see as like a primary driver for an MSP to go to an event and actively engage with a vendor before attending the event?
For me, it's going to be mostly around if I want to get to know the vendor better, if I want to get to know their product better, I'm going to reach out. I'm going to want to have a conversation. Sometimes I don't know who to reach out to, where to reach out, etc. So that information being more available, maybe on the event coordinator's website or something like that, could be helpful. We also would need to know to look there. And the events that I go to are the ones that I know that if I'm speaking at, my feedback will be. I mean, me speaking there will be valuable for me and for the attendees there. For those types of opportunities I'm looking for. I'm also looking for opportunities that are more niche, as George was saying earlier, events, not the generalist events, because you end up with certain companies up on stage and it doesn't hit home. It doesn't make sense. Why am I sitting here? Why am I doing this? Why am I wasting my time? I should be building my business. You need those that from the first keynote to the closing party, every single event, every single breakout, every single keynote speaks directly to the person sitting there in the audience, and that's extremely important to me.
If I don't know who to contact, I just contact Henry Tim.
Well, yeah,
he essentially is my address book.
No, but I mean, from a vendor standpoint, it's got to be frustrating trying to one, reach out to MSPs to get that engagement because it does take a number of times typically to get through. But also, I have to imagine just tracking the metrics around how many engagements at an event or how many events you have to be at before a prospective buyer is willing to have a conversation with you. And then where do you attribute that dollar that you spent over that course of events to that lead gen? I would be interested, I guess, how do you guys track that, or do you just look at it as per event as far as that spend goes, or do you kind of look at that collective cost of, okay, for 2025, it's going to cost us X dollars, and this is our target for number of prospects?
I think Jay McBain on I think it was at PAX 8 Beyond in Denver in June said that it takes 22 touch points across the board to go from zero to relationship that's transacting, right? So I don't care if that's a social media post, a conversation, a beer, I don't know. There's a lot of ways to get to 22 touch points. Back to the how do you track ROI across all the events? We've spent a lot of time programming. I mean, some people use Salesforce, we use HubSpot, but we spent a lot of time creating weighted formulas to try and get there. It's not very easy on its face, especially if you're just doing it in an Excel spreadsheet. But the reality is that there is a cost per contact calculation that starts a domino triaging effect of determining many other Shark Tank analytics, I like to call them. So, like cost per contact, cost per qualified lead, cost per demo, cost per customer, and then lifetime customer value, right? All of these things that probably get asked in the boardroom, when you're asking for investor dollars are real metrics, but it starts with cost per contact.
Andrew?
Yeah. So I've just been jotting down notes. A few things I'd like to say. I think it's incumbent, if you're putting on an event, I think it's really incumbent to have an advisory council, both from your sponsors, which we do, and from our MSPs. And I think it's really important, first and foremost, to understand what your mission and vision are in regards to your audience. And so for us, what I can speak to is in our vision, our mission is to educate, and increase maturity, security, and profitability for MSPs and MSSPs. That if we hold true to that mission, we get the best and typically some of the most mature MSPs there. And therefore, because we're providing great content, what we've heard from many, many sponsors every year is ROI, we are their number one show. Now, are we for everybody? Absolutely not. But I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that one of the other things that was hitting is, are they leaving with something actionable? Again, I sit at every event I go to. I watch from the vendor perspective and I watch from the attendee perspective. And I try to have every meal with the MSPs. and I was sitting with Robert Chiaffi, and he was wonderful in saying, like, look, this year, make sure you guys have some type of artifact. And we did that last year that we could walk away with. And this year, we're going to really double down on that. So if you're, for example, sitting in a VCSO workshop main stage, there's a workbook. Yeah, there you go, George. Thank you. That was our threat brief on Black Hat. But you're walking away with something, right? That's actually, even if I can't build a VCSO practice right now, I don't have the mature, I'm just using this as a lexicon, an example rather. Even if I don't have the maturity right now to build one based on what I heard from Jerry, and wow, I could sit down with my team and say, hey, look, this is a workbook that we can come back to. It's a rock. I'd like to make this a rock for us in Q3 of next year. Let's aim towards that. The other thing that came up, and I think just last 2 points real quick, community. This year, we're having a whole area of community. We're having MSP Geek come. We're having Cyberdrink. We're having Flow, CIS, and allowing kind of a cross flow of communities, and hopefully that they can carry from one event to another. And lastly, the point on getting lists pre-event, it's a fine line, and we get into the whole privacy area, and we could probably spend a whole show on this, but it is a real thing and it's a real concern, and there's real ramifications if you don't do it correctly. So, that I would just, echo that, yes, we want to do always the right thing, but it's a fine balancing act between protecting the rights of people these days, that certainly if you're coming from EMIR and, dealing with GDPR and things of that nature, to CCPA and, all the governing states that are starting to put practices in place. So I appreciate it. Let me kind of just unpack what I've heard over the last half hour or so.
Andrew,
No,
can I ask you? Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I just had a quick question for you, because when you said you have the two councils, I was wondering how aligned is what they want. When you have your vendor council and you have your partner council, are they meeting the same goals? And because if you can't please everyone, who do you aim it at, right? And I would say it's the partners, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's an awesome question, Michelle, and probably something we should look at better, kind of maybe even bringing the two groups together. In fact, based on your question, I will do that this coming year. We listen, to try to understand what the attendees want, because if I don't give you, you're our diamond sponsor this year, which we're grateful for. And if I don't deliver really good MSPs for you, it's really hard to get you back. So what our formula has been, first and foremost, is how do I get the MSPs there that really want to learn, that are mature, that are okay with, we're not the party crazy event. We are education first event. But how do I get those people there? And then we listen to, on the sponsor side, hey, look, when you do every year we do a matchmaking MSP dinner to give that more one-on-one time. How can we get that experience better? And so, we're working on our formulas there. But great question, and something I'll look deeper into, and not to, just give you a smoke screen answer. I got to do a better job on maybe matchmaking that, like putting the two groups together on a call. That's a great idea.
So, one, thanks for explaining why the security is there and why we're not getting that interaction ahead of time. I don't know that everybody understands that. They're not really thinking about GDPR and other things, because that's not where our minds are, right? As a US-based MSP, we're not thinking about that. So, like I said, it's all of those little things that we don't think about as attendees that we do need to know about, so that we can understand why things are the way they are a little bit better. And the other thing that you touched on was the, not the party event, right? And yet I was just at one literally in Vegas that we had people showing up at 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning every morning and filling every seat. So I'm going to kick this over to Taher. Like, how does that happen? Like, I was shocked that the seats were filled in the morning.
I was so proud of everyone in the room because it was so education focused. Like I literally, day one, I issued a challenge. I said, there's a lot of people that, they're just talking off experience in Vegas that day three will have 50%, 40% of day one. And day three was almost as packed as day one in Las Vegas with Distraction City. And it just showed that they're here to learn, not to party. And, I love everyone's discussion on this whole thing. I think if you bring good content, you put content as number one and you hand select the vendors you want to be there, like we did, you're going to have a great recipe for success. So I spent more time on the content of the presentations and the presenters than anything else with the conference. And I think that's oftentimes missed. Like I'll see, like I've been invited to speak at stuff where like, they don't even know who I am. They've never listened to my podcast. They just throw me into the mix. And I'm like, what if I sucked? Like I happen to be good, but like, you didn't do any research on me. There's no due diligence. I'm just at your event. And fortunately, I feel like I crushed, but they're doing that with a lot of other people. Whereas everybody on my stage I've seen speak before, I've had multiple conversations with, I've listened to their content for hours and hours, like Harrison Barron. So like I knew going into it, like these are the heavy hitters. Like Dawn spoke when she said she was willing to speak. I was like, you're exactly who I would want to speak. Right. So like, I think curating the playlist is the most important thing about any conference and oftentimes can get missed. So I know there was a long answer, but I think that's kind of my thoughts on it.
I challenge every event planner on or off this call to not start anything before 8:30 a.m. I know it's hard to squeeze things into the schedule, but 7:30, nah, man. Got to go. 8:39. How about that?
George, I got to tell you, like having that 9 a.m. start when we were in Denver was nice because I got a couple things done in the morning and then I was able to not be distracted during the actual event.
Yeah, so. And by the way, I'm going to put the countering voice into this comment because two of you now made the comment. You got to expect the party's happening. Don't fool yourself. Well, I don't care if it's a sweet party, you're out on the Vegas Strip, you're taking people out to dinner and that dinner goes late. Like, just plan for it rather than just trying to offset it because you're never going to get those people to not go out.
Yeah. I'm with you. I'm on the camp, George. And I like what you said also about the ability for you to get your day done for your help, your work or whatever you need to do, and then sit there and focus. Because the other part is if they do come early for the opening keynote or what have you, they might drift and get tired and go get coffee and then go back to their room. And so it kind of gives you this chance to just lock people in and hope that they're there and you have great content. I will challenge that. If you get a sponsorship, you don't always get to control who shows up, right? They're going to send who they send. And the hope, I mean, that's the difference, right? If you're truly doing it for education, you hand select people that are great speakers and you're putting them main stage, right? Then it's not a pay to play. And that's a great thing. But as a person coordinating it how do you complement that, right? How do you get the right sponsors and the right speakers and still make your money back so you don't have a $70,000 deficit? And, so I feel like that's the balance, right? We want to do the right thing. We want to have the right content and education. Hopefully you get both. I mean, I think there's a lot of great speakers who are educational, but you don't always get that. And so how do you balance that? That would be the call to action.
And back to the balance for, one sentence here. You can balance hyper educational 8:30 and beyond and still have entertainment at night. Like the party can still happen. We can win on both fronts.
Yeah, I think too much of me leaked into this. Like I don't drink. I wanted all the content. So I tried starting it at 7:30 and Nigel was like, hell no, dude. And so I'm glad I had a co-host, right? And like literally breaks, I didn't have breaks factored in. Nigel was like, we need breaks, right? Like, so there were so many things that, we're going to change next year, but I think too much. We didn't even have an after hours other than VIP, right? It was all these other options from sponsors. So just stuff like that where I'm like, okay, yeah, like classic faux pas of your first conference that we're going to definitely change next year.
Fair.
Very cool. I know we're getting towards the top of the hour here of this episode and a lot of great stuff. And I'm sure we can continue discussing hopefully on a future episode with you, with you all. But kind of in closing here, what's something that you really want people to take away that you wish they knew about events? Is it the scope of what goes into the planning? Is it the cost? Is it kind of those competing influences? Yeah. What's something that you wish more people understood?
Only 8% of the 100% of possible IT, managed services, technology services, I don't care whatever term you want to use, IT businesses actually make it out to one event in a 12-month period. Only 8%. What about the other 92%? Think about that. Think about the 500 events you guys said are happening next year are only touching 8% of the possible market. Think about that and then come back and talk to me.
I think Taher should add a coloring page to his handout.
A coloring.
Yeah,
I can make that happen.
So yeah,
I
Dawn's
think it would elevate it to an even higher level if I had a page that I could color.
Dude, that's actually a great idea. We'll have like little children's book.
Tell you what, man.
I mean, that's right up my alley, though. I love that.
Sorry.
Adults, I'm in.
That's all Craig's got today.
I'll add some color also. I think that the most important thing is the value for everybody involved, right? Whether it's, getting that feedback. For me, I have a 10-year-old and 8-year-old at home. I love my family. If I'm going to be on the road, I think of my vendors that I'm on the road with more than my own family sometimes, right? Like these are my extended family on the road. The partners are my extended family. And I want all of us to be happy when we leave that conference. I want to give value. I want to build relationships. And I want them, if they're spending time away from their business, to leave with the ability for them to be better than when they got there. I don't want to pitch products at people. I don't want to talk speeds and feeds. Unless you want to learn more, we have a lot of great people that can talk about that. But how will we help you be more profitable? How will we help you be more successful? Are we skating to where the puck is going in terms of the threat landscape? Are we meeting your needs? Can you give us feedback about where we're missing the mark, to Taher's point? Like, it's not just the good news. Where's the bad news? And how can we help? That's really what I'd like to get out of this as a vendor. And I hope that I'm driving the right value for the partners that I have the privilege of talking with and spending time with.
And then on the flip side of that, from the partner side, as long as there's follow through, that is 100% dead on. It's when there's no follow through that it gets frustrating. So
most of the time there's no follow through.
Yeah, I would say the other last thing, I'll be super quick, is like we went into it wanting to lose 70 grand. Like, I don't think I'm cool with events being a profit center. That's totally fine. But I love that Nigel and I were like, look, the goal is not to make money, and it will literally never be to make money. And when you do that, like, all the sponsorships were super cheap. Everybody should get an ROI unless their product sucks, right? And literally, if we changed it by $2,000, where every sponsor had to pay $2,000 more, we'd break even, right? So I just think, like, and next year we're going to pay speakers, right? Like, because that's how you really get competitive and you really get the right people in the room. So I would just say, like, you can have an amazing event if you're willing to lose money, and you can have an amazing event if you're willing to break even. You don't have to make money on events, I think, at least from my perspective.
So again, I'm gonna speak to that for just a second. Colin Knox actually called that out on LinkedIn, and I think that was one of the most powerful statements that was made. A lot of vendors ask us to come speak. We're not compensated. We pour 20 plus hours into a deck, creating the things, and the only thing we get out of it is we show up and do the thing, right? So I think calling that out and making sure that people are adequately compensated for the work that they're putting in is huge. It is huge. So is it a differentiator? 100%.
Yeah, that's going to be literally, in the price per speaker is just going to go up each year, because it's like, that's going to make everyone in the room love it more, because there's literally, speakers are being compensated to provide this presentation versus it being another thing they have to do. And it's going to be a point where, like, they're really compensated well. So I'm excited about that too, as we continue to progress.
I'm not sure the attendee really, that computes into their whole motive. But I'm with you. Like,
They won't notice.
get a win-win-win, right? Like
Yeah.
vendor, conference holder, speaker, fine. I'm with you. I'm just saying, like,
Uh,
all the attendee cares about is making sure that there's something beneficial and the quality of the event is good coming out of it. So if that helps you to get there, awesome.
Yeah, I'm just saying we're all driven by incentives, and having money behind a speaking spot will make sure the presenter is going to be a little more polished because they want to make it next year because it's going to be more money. So 100% preparation will go up more if you're being compensated to be there versus not compensated to be there, is my point.
Fair.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you guys again for joining us today and hopping on this, taking the time. Hope you all stay safe with the hurricane. I did want to take a moment here with start with Andrew, kind of talk about hurricane relief efforts that you posted about Hurricane Helen relief efforts. There was an MSP drastically impacted here in Asheville, North Carolina. You mind speaking a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll be brief because but basically, I've known Electronic Office for 20 years. I knew Kemper Brown's dad, who started it, and when I knew Asheville got just walloped, when you hear Tim Kennedy talk about it, who brought Save Our Allies in, and you see the pictures, but then you hear somebody firsthand talk about the term he used was apocalyptic. I reached out right away to Kemper. He told me that everybody luckily has made it on his team and the families have made it. But devastating to almost 60 families that he employs. And I wanted to do something. So on the weekend, I'd been starting to plan this, but on the weekend leading into it Friday, I reached out to some of my friends at some of the companies here, and there's many others now. We are just crusting up at $50,000. That is going to go to that MSP and their families. And so these are if you like I said, you don't have to. All you have to do is Google Asheville and homes, right? What the results of people's homes are like, and they're literally annihilated. They're gone. These people have lost. Many people have lost literally everything. There's massive loss of life as well. Fortunately, like I said, their MSP was spared and their families were spared. But this is something, if you listen to the cyber call Monday where we had Kemper come on, this is something that's going to last a generation. This is not something that's going to get fixed in a few years. I just felt I had to do something. That's all.
Yeah, for sure. No, and listening in on the cyber call on Monday, listening to Kemper kind of talk about the impact of yes, as an MSP, we have these DR scenarios kind of planned out, and this is so catastrophic that it, throws all that kind of up in the air a bit. And he was speaking, something that stood out was the 5 or 6 days, I think, to hear from his teammates, from his coworkers, whether they were even okay.
Yeah, great call out, Henry. And his point on one thing we've done tons of I'm paraphrasing. We've done tons of tabletops. We have a good IR plan. Luckily he said all our cloud backups everything went well for him. But the one thing he said we didn't take into account was we wouldn't have any cell service. And we've had Clark Harshbarger on the cyber call, who's literally the guy, the head of CrowdStrike IR, and he talks about, IR plans are critical, tabletops are critical, but when the Mike Tyson moment comes and you're punched in the face, your call tree is the most critical thing, and to not be able to call people, so yeah, pretty like wow, and yeah, hindsight, he would have had some Starlink and things that but it's these lessons that the reason we did this is like, hey, if we can help just now people that are in hurricane prone or disaster prone areas think a little bit more about their DR plans and how they approach it, and we can help one or two more people, that's a win.
Absolutely. And thank you very much for throwing this together. I know that the community in general is trying to do all they can to assist those impacted, both by Helen and obviously you're in the path right now of
Milton.
Milton. Yes, thank you. And so we hope that you are staying safe, and hopefully the impact is minimal, but be thinking of you.
Thanks, Henry. Thanks, Dawn. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. If you need anything, let us know, please.
Thanks.
And with that, Michelle, I wanted to, you posted a bunch of resources the other day on social media that people could tap into for hurricane relief. I guess, what do you think is probably the best thing? I know you're in Florida yourself, but what are some of the best resources out there for MSPs and their families?
I will add one more to that list. There's an Amazon. I sit on the Alliance of Channel Women Council, and some wonderful women from that council recently put together a list of supplies that are needed for the people that have lost things, from portable showers and bathrooms and winter jackets, and a ton of things that are on that list. So I will share that link as well on this LinkedIn post. Feel free to connect or message me, and or email me at mragusa@sonicwall.com. But I would say that, there are tremendous national organizations that are really doing an incredible job to pool resources, and there's a lot of local, like the Cajun Kitchen and other places that are trying to do this. These hit a special place near and dear to my heart, because I not only live in Florida, but I also spent 7 years of my life living in North Carolina, and I very much know the areas that were impacted. They're beautiful areas and people that are, the Tampa storm that just hit was the worst one in 100 years, and now we have another one just 2 weeks later. So these things are very scary, because there's a lot of lack of control you feel at times like this. So if you can, please donate to those in need. We'd welcome that generosity. All of these organizations are here to support families that are going through this, and obviously keep the prayers going. My ask is, if you're there and you need to evacuate, please do. And if you don't have anywhere to go, please reach out to us in Southern Florida, or we're welcoming. We might not have all the beds in the world, but I really don't want people to stay there. And get out, bring your pets, and try to stay safe. Don't try to brave the storm, because this is going to be one of the worst ones that we've seen. I think it's the fifth largest hurricane this area has ever seen that's in coming in. So just prayers to everyone, and let's try to give, if we can, to those impacted.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing all the resources. I know SonicWall, as well as yourself, have done a lot for the industry and for MSPs that are in need, and I know that there are a lot of community resources out there as well that people can call on. I've seen some stuff on Reddit. MSP Geek has some great resources that they posted. So reach out to those MSP communities that are out there that and vendors. There's a lot of vendors stepping up and doing their part. So thank you, Michelle, and please stay safe.
Thank you, and check on your friends. We all have each other in this. Thank you so much, Henry and Dawn.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to transition to talking briefly about some upcoming industry events. I know that most of these are going to have a lot of degenerates at them coming up. Wild West Hacking Fest currently going on this week. And then, Dawn, I think you're going to be at Channel Pro Dallas. Is that correct?
I am not going to be at Channel Pro Dallas, but I will be at Channel Pro Defend later in November.
Okay. I will be at the PAX 8 Beyond Berlin and CompTIA EMEA in London. If you're there, look me up. More than happy to talk shop with you and catch up over a pint. And then Exchange has their Best of Breed event then the ASCII Cup is going to be in St. Pete in a little over a month, or about a month, I think. Allegedly.
A couple of weeks, so we'll see how that's going to go. We're waiting to hear what's up with that, because I would be leaving like next Tuesday for that. So we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully, it'll go off without a hitch.
Yeah. And then Next Gen, I believe, is in Houston towards the end of this month, and then DattoCon in Miami.
Right. And then, of course, IT Nation is coming up right after that. And if you guys don't already know, we do have a considerable discount code. So if you haven't bought your tickets for IT Nation yet, please do so. The code is there. It's down on the little ticker, but also you'll find it on the live stream in the comments, so you can click on it directly from there.
Yeah, and that 35% is higher or a higher discount than you'll be able to find pretty much anywhere else. So they do have that limited to the first 100 people to claim it, but we're also very excited that Tech Degenerates will have our own little mini sessions at the event itself at IT Nation. But I know that several other communities are also going to be represented there, such as Riot Boom, I believe MSP Geek, and several others, CompTIA as well. So looking forward to all that community-generated content that should be there this year. And then obviously we have our reoccurring events that Tech Degenerates are running. So we'll have the CompTIA Trustmark office hours every Thursday.
2 p.m. Eastern Time.
Yep. It's open, hop in, hop out as needed to review controls and ask questions. Usually there is someone from CompTIA available to help you kind of navigate that and answer any questions. Then we also have our monthly after hours or happy hour happening tomorrow evening. That typically starts at 8 p.m. Eastern and is a wild call that typically goes till about 1 a.m. So if you can stomach that late of a night, power to you. And then Dawn, I know there is also the informal peer group coming up.
Yep, informal peer groups happen every other Thursday evening, and they are literally a drop in, drop out anytime. Bring your, woes and all other things to it. We try to, save the world one horrific decision at a time.
And of course, we want to thank our community supporters. We're able to do what we do because of their support in our vision and mission. So a big thank you to ThreatLocker and FEMA Security, CompTIA, and Channel Pro for their support. And then join us next month. We'll be talking about living your values beyond basic due diligence with your vendors. So we'll be diving into how do you select and align with your vendors and their missions and values. And until then, hope that everyone stays safe, on all of our friends in Florida. Stay safe and get out of the path. And if you do need help, please reach out. Plenty of resources that we can help direct you towards. So thank you all for joining us today.
See you next time.